Have you ever spent your entire summer sweating out in the garden, tying up vines, mixing expensive fertilizers, and watering every single day, only to end up with a pathetic handful of cracked, diseased tomatoes? It is one of the most frustrating feelings in the world. But what if I told you that the secret to a massive, jungle-like harvest is actually to do less? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into the ultimate lazy gardener's guide to growing tomatoes outdoors in the ground. We are going to cover everything from the exact right way to plant them, how to feed them without wasting money, the absolute fastest way to stake them up, and how to care for them so they produce until the very first frost. By the end of this video, you are going to learn a secret about harvesting that goes against everything your grandparents taught you, but it will save dozens of your tomatoes from being ruined by pests. You see, the biggest myth in the gardening world is that a successful harvest requires endless, back-breaking labor. We have been brainwashed into thinking that if we are not constantly digging, spraying, and fussing, we are bad gardeners. I am here to tell you that nature is actually incredibly smart, and if we just set things up correctly on day one, we can step back and let the plants do the hard work. So, are you ready to stop babysitting your garden and start actually enjoying it? Let me know in the comments right now if you consider yourself a hard-working gardener or a proud, lazy gardener. Before we get our hands dirty with planting and pruning, we need to understand exactly what a tomato plant actually is, because this completely changes how we treat them. You see, in their native habitat in South America, wild tomatoes are not these neat, upright little bushes that we try to force them to be in our modern backyards. They are sprawling, aggressive, tropical vines that want to crawl all over the ground, rooting wherever their stems touch the earth. They are genetically programmed to scavenge for nutrients, fight for sunlight, and produce as much fruit as possible before they die. When we take this wild, sprawling vine and try to force it to grow straight up a tiny little bamboo pole in a neat row, we are basically fighting against millions of years of evolution. The secret to smart, low-effort gardening is not to fight the plant's nature, but to use it to our absolute advantage. We want to harness that aggressive rooting energy and channel it into producing massive amounts of fruit, rather than just growing a messy pile of leaves. By understanding that your tomato is a hungry, sun-loving vine that secretly wants to take over your entire yard, you will suddenly understand why shallow watering fails, why flimsy stakes snap in the wind, and why traditional fertilizing methods often leave you with giant green plants and absolutely zero fruit. When it comes to putting your tomatoes into the ground, the very first step is choosing the absolute perfect location and waiting for the right moment. Most eager gardeners make the fatal mistake of rushing outside the minute the calendar says it is spring. But tomatoes are originally tropical plants, and they absolutely hate cold feet. Think of your tomato seedlings like tourists on a tropical beach. If the water is freezing, they are going to shiver, stop moving, and refuse to grow. You need to wait until the soil temperature is consistently warm, which usually means waiting at least 2 weeks after your last expected frost date. If you plant them into cold, damp earth, their roots will instantly go into a state of shock, stunting their growth for weeks. While your impatient neighbors are dealing with purple, shivering plants, your lazy approach of waiting on the couch for an extra couple of weeks will actually put you ahead of the game. When you finally do select the spot, ensure it gets a minimum of 8 hours of direct, blazing sunlight every single day. The more sun they get, the sweeter the fruits will be, and the less you will have to worry about fungal diseases settling on damp leaves. It is all about working with nature instead of fighting it. By simply picking the warmest, sunniest patch of dirt in your yard and refusing to rush the season, you are already setting yourself up for a massive harvest with zero extra physical labor on your part. Now let us talk about spacing, because this is where the greedy gardener often ruins their own harvest. It is incredibly tempting to cram as many tomato plants as possible into a small garden bed, thinking that more plants will automatically equal more food. This is a massive mistake. Think of a crowded subway car in the middle of summer. When everyone is packed tightly together, nobody can breathe, And if one person gets sick, everyone gets sick. Your tomato plants operate on the exact same principle. When you plant them too close together, their leaves overlap, creating a dense, humid jungle where air simply cannot circulate. This trapped moisture is an absolute magnet for devastating fungal diseases like early blight. Furthermore, the root systems underground will end up fighting a brutal war for water and nutrients, leaving all the plants weak and stressed. For the absolute best results with the least amount of disease management later, you must give your plants breathing room. Space them at least 2 to 3 feet apart, depending on the variety. Yes, your garden bed might look a little bare in the month of May, but by July, those plants will have exploded in size. Giving them proper space is the ultimate lazy pest control method. You are using the wind and the sun to dry out the leaves naturally, saving you from having to mix and spray expensive organic fungicides all summer long. Here is a planting secret that completely revolutionizes how much water your plants will need, and it is called trench planting. If you look closely at the stem of your tomato seedling, you will notice it is covered in tiny fuzzy white hairs. Those are not just for decoration. Every single one of those tiny hairs has the magical ability to turn into a thick, powerful root if it comes into contact with the soil. Most people dig a shallow little hole, pop the plant in, and call it a day. But the smart gardener knows better. Instead of a standard hole, you want to dig a long, horizontal trench about 6 inches deep. Snip off the bottom leaves of your seedling, lay the plant down horizontally in the trench, and gently bend the top few inches upward so it sits above the soil line. Then, bury that entire bare stem. Over the next few weeks, that buried stem will explode with a massive, deep root system. Think of it like building a deep, solid, concrete foundation for a skyscraper, instead of just resting a house on top of the grass. Because the roots are buried so deeply, they are completely protected from the hot summer sun baking the surface of the soil. They will be able to access deep reserves of moisture, meaning you will have to water them far less frequently. This one lazy trick, done on planting day, saves you countless hours of standing around with a watering can during the blazing heat of July. Let us completely rethink how we handle pest control right from the start, using a method called companion planting. Instead of waiting for bugs to attack your precious tomatoes and then reacting by spraying harsh chemicals, we can build an invisible, natural fortress around our plants. The absolute best friends a tomato can have in the garden are basil and marigolds. When you plant basil right at the base of your tomatoes, it does something incredible. The strong, pungent oils in the basil leaves actually confuse and repel common pests, like the tomato hornworm, acting like a natural cloaking device for your crop. Plus, some gardeners swear that growing basil nearby actually makes the tomatoes taste sweeter. Then we have marigolds. Planting a thick border of bright orange marigolds around your tomato bed provides 2 massive benefits. First, their roots release a special chemical into the soil that actively kills destructive microscopic nematodes that want to chew on your tomato roots. Second, the bright flowers attract beneficial insects like ladybugs and parasitic wasps. These good bugs are the microscopic assassins of the garden world, and they will happily spend their days hunting down and eating the aphids that want to destroy your harvest. By simply tossing a few seeds of basil and marigolds into the dirt when you plant your tomatoes, you are setting up an automated, self-sustaining pest control system that works 24 hours a day while you sleep. The very first time you water your newly planted tomatoes is absolutely critical because you are essentially training them for the rest of their lives. There's a very common myth that gardens need a light, gentle sprinkling of water every single evening. This is actually the worst thing you can do for tomatoes. If you only give them a little splash of water on the surface, their roots have no reason to grow downward. They will stay shallow, hanging out right near the top of the soil, waiting for your daily sprinkle. But what happens when you go on vacation for 3 days, or a severe heat wave hits? That top layer of soil dries out in hours, and your plants will instantly wilt and panic. Instead, you need to practice deep, infrequent watering. When you water those newly planted babies, you want to soak the earth thoroughly, letting the water penetrate inches down into the soil profile. Then, you walk away and do not water them again until the top 2 inches of the soil are completely dry to the touch. This tough love approach forces the roots to dive deep into the earth, searching for moisture. We are essentially teaching the roots to become drought resistant. By training your plants to be deeply rooted from day one, you transition from a stressed out gardener who has to water every single day to a relaxed gardener who only needs to give the garden a deep soak once or twice a week. If there is one single step that separates the overworked amateur from the relaxed, successful gardener, it is the magic of mulching. Leaving the soil bare around your tomato plants is an absolute crime against your own free time. Bare soil bakes in the sun, evaporating precious moisture into the air in a matter of hours. It also provides the perfect empty canvas for thousands of weed seeds to blow in and take root, guaranteeing you will spend your weekends on your hands and knees pulling weeds. To fix this, you need to apply a thick 3 to 4 inch layer of organic mulch around the base of your plants immediately after planting. You can use straw, shredded leaves from last autumn, or even untreated grass clippings. Think of mulch as a protective, temperature-regulating blanket for the earth. It locks the moisture in the soil, meaning you have to water half as often. It completely blocks the sunlight from reaching weed seeds, stopping them from germinating in the first place, which means no more tedious weeding. Furthermore, as that organic mulch slowly breaks down over the summer, it gently feeds the soil ecosystem, creating a rich, fluffy environment that earthworms absolutely love. Mulching takes about 10 minutes to apply in the spring, and it literally saves you dozens of hours of sweating, weeding, and watering throughout the grueling heat of the summer months. Now, we absolutely must talk about staking and supporting your plants. And the biggest mistake people make is waiting too long to do it. It is incredibly easy to look at a tiny 6-inch tall tomato seedling and think you have plenty of time before it needs support. But in the heat of early summer, a healthy tomato plant can grow several inches in a single day. Before you know it, you have a heavy, sprawling green monster flopping all over the muddy ground, and trying to wrestle a mature plant into a cage is a nightmare that usually results in snapped branches. The smart move is to install your support system on the exact same day that you put the plants in the ground. When you drive a stake into the earth next to a tiny seedling, you do not disturb any roots. If you wait a month and try to drive a thick wooden stake into the ground, you are going to slice right through the plant's established root system, shocking the plant and setting back your harvest. And please, throw away those tiny, flimsy, 3-foot-tall wire cages they sell at big box stores. A healthy, indeterminate tomato vine will outgrow that cage by July, and a heavy wind will topple the whole thing over. You need sturdy support. Use heavy wooden stakes, thick metal T-posts, or heavy-duty cattle panels. Build the infrastructure for the giant plant you are going to have, not for the tiny seedling you are looking at right now. Since we are talking about support, let me share the absolute fastest, easiest way to trellis a long row of tomatoes without spending a fortune on individual cages. It is called the Florida weave method, and it is a total game changer for the lazy gardener. Instead of tying every single branch of every single plant to a pole, you simply pound a heavy-duty post into the ground at the ends of your row, and put one post between every 2 or 3 plants. Then, you take a massive spool of heavy-duty garden twine. Starting at one end, you tie the twine about 6 inches off the ground, and literally just weave the string in and out, passing in front of the first plant, behind the second plant, pulling it tight around the middle post, and continuing down the line. When you reach the end, you turn around and weave your way back, doing the exact opposite. What you create is a tight sandwich of string that holds all the plants completely upright. As the plants grow taller, you simply add another layer of woven string every 8 to 10 inches. It takes less than 5 minutes to weave a row of 20 plants. There is no messy tying, no snapping delicate stems, and it provides incredible support against severe summer thunderstorms. The Florida weave turns a tedious, hour-long chore into a quick, effortless stroll down your garden row with a ball of string in your hand. Before we can even begin to talk about pruning our tomatoes, we have to clear up a crucial piece of context that confuses almost every beginner. You must know whether the variety you planted is determinate or indeterminate. This is not just fancy gardening jargon. It completely dictates how you treat the plant. Determinate tomatoes are genetically programmed to grow to a specific, compact height, usually around 3 or 4 feet tall. They produce all their flowers and ripen all their fruit in one massive burst over a period of a few weeks, and then they slowly die off. You never, ever aggressively prune a determinate tomato plant. If you cut branches off a determinate plant, you are literally just throwing your harvest into the compost bin. Indeterminate tomatoes, on the other hand, are the wild, sprawling vines we talked about earlier. They have no genetic stop button. They will continue to grow taller and taller, producing new vines, new flowers, and new fruit constantly until the autumn frost finally kills them. These are the plants that require pruning and training. Otherwise, they will turn your garden into an impenetrable, tangled jungle of disease. Knowing which type you have is the absolute foundation of smart tomato care. So, always keep your seed packets or plant tags, because treating a bush variety like a vine variety is a guaranteed way to ruin your entire summer of gardening. For those tall, indeterminate vines, we need to master the art of pruning the suckers. But do not worry, it is incredibly simple once you know what to look for. If you look closely at the main stem of your tomato plant, you will see horizontal branches growing outwards. Right in the armpit, that 45-degree angle where the horizontal branch meets the vertical stem, you will see a new, tiny little shoot starting to grow. That is a sucker. If left alone, that tiny shoot will grow into a completely new, thick main stem, stealing energy from the rest of the plant. Think of your tomato plant's energy like a rushing river. If the river splits into 20 different small streams, the water pressure in each stream is very weak. But if you block those side streams and force all the water down 1 or 2 main channels, the flow is incredibly powerful. By pinching off those little suckers when they are small, you are directing all of the plant's solar energy into producing bigger, juicier fruits on the main stem, rather than wasting energy growing an endless maze of green leaves. The lazy way to do this is simply to walk through your garden once a week with your morning coffee, scanning the armpits of the plants, and just snapping off the little suckers with your fingers. No special tools required, just a gentle pinch that guides the energy of the plant exactly where you want it to go. While we are on the topic of pruning, there is another incredibly important step that will save you from heartbreak later in the season, and that is removing the lower leaves. As your tomato plant grows taller and establishes its canopy higher up, those bottom leaves resting near the dirt actually become a massive liability. Whenever it rains hard or if you accidentally splash water when irrigating, the wet soil splatters up onto those lower leaves. That garden soil is filled with microscopic fungal spores like early blight and septoria leaf spot, which are just waiting for a damp leaf to land on. Once the fungus takes hold on those bottom leaves, it will slowly march its way up the entire plant, turning the leaves yellow and brown until the plant is completely dead. To prevent this, once your plant is about 2 feet tall, take a clean pair of snips and completely remove any leaves that are touching the ground or hanging within 6 inches of the soil. You are essentially creating a clean, airy buffer zone between the dangerous soil and the healthy foliage above. This allows the wind to blow freely under the plants, keeping the main stems dry and completely cutting off the ladder that diseases use to climb up. It is a 5-minute task that acts as an invisible shield for your crop, proving once again that smart preventative care is always easier than trying to cure a sick plant later. Now let us tackle the mysterious world of fertilizing. Walking down the fertilizer aisle at a garden center can be completely overwhelming with all those numbers and promises of giant vegetables. But understanding what your tomatoes actually need is surprisingly simple. Every fertilizer has 3 main numbers on the bag, representing nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, always in that exact order. When you first plant your tomatoes out in the garden, they do not need massive amounts of food right away. In fact, if you dump a heavy dose of nitrogen-rich fertilizer into the planting hole, you will burn the tender young roots. Nitrogen is the chemical responsible for explosive green leaf growth. If you feed a tomato plant too much nitrogen throughout the summer, it will look incredibly beautiful. it will become a massive, dark green, 10-foot-tall monster of a plant. But when you look closely, you will realize it has absolutely no flowers and no fruit. The plant is so happy making leaves that it completely forgets to reproduce. In the early stages, you only want to provide a gentle, balanced, slow-release organic fertilizer mixed into the soil. Let the roots establish themselves naturally in the rich earth. We want a strong, steady foundation, not a sudden, panicked explosion of weak, sappy green growth that attracts aphids and totally ruins your chances of a heavy harvest. The debate between synthetic chemical fertilizers and natural organic methods is loud, but for the lazy gardener, organic is always the winner. When you pour a blue liquid synthetic fertilizer onto your plants, you are force-feeding the roots directly. It is like giving the plant a sugary energy drink. It works incredibly fast, but it washes out of the soil just as quickly with the next heavy rain, meaning you have to constantly reapply it every single week. That sounds like a lot of unnecessary work. Organic fertilizers, like compost, worm castings, or bone meal, work completely differently. You are not actually feeding the plant. You are feeding the billions of microscopic living organisms inside the soil. Think of these microbes as tiny chefs. You give them raw ingredients, and they slowly cook and break down those nutrients into a perfect, easily digestible format for the tomato roots to drink up whenever they need it. This slow release process is pure magic. You mix a couple of handfuls of good organic granular fertilizer into the soil at planting time and maybe scratch a little more into the surface right when the first flowers appear, and you are basically done. The microbes do all the hard work of feeding the plant steadily for months. You save money, you save time, and you build incredibly rich, healthy soil that will produce better and better harvests year after year. As the season progresses and your tomato plants transition from growing leaves to pushing out bright yellow flowers, their dietary needs completely change. This is the moment where many gardeners fail to adapt. When the plant enters its reproductive phase, it needs far less nitrogen and a significant boost of phosphorus and potassium. Phosphorus is the essential engine behind strong blossom development. Without enough of it, your plants might produce flowers that simply dry up and fall off without ever turning into tiny green tomatoes. Potassium is what handles the overall health of the fruit, helping the plant move water and sugars efficiently, ensuring the tomatoes grow large, sweet, and perfectly shaped. At this stage, finding a fertilizer specifically designed for blooming plants, often labeled as a tomato or bloom booster formula, is crucial. But be wary of old gardening myths. You will often hear people say to bury crushed eggshells around the base of the plant to provide calcium and stop diseases. The reality is that an eggshell will take years to break down in the dirt to a point where a plant can actually absorb it. If your plant needs a boost right now, a handful of jagged eggshells will do absolutely nothing. Stick to properly formulated, finely ground organic amendments that the soil biology can actually process and deliver to your hungry plants when they need it most. One of the most heartbreaking moments in gardening is walking out to find your beautiful, almost ripe tomatoes split wide open with deep, ugly cracks across their skin. This is not caused by a disease, and it is not a pest. It is entirely a watering issue, and it is totally preventable. Tomato skins have a certain amount of elasticity, but they can only stretch so fast. When you allow your garden soil to dry out completely during a hot week, the tomato plant slows down its growth, and the skin of the fruit hardens slightly to protect itself. If you then suddenly blast the garden with a massive amount of water, or if a severe thunderstorm rolls through, the plant acts like a sponge. It greedily sucks up gallons of water, pumping it straight into the fruits. The flesh inside the tomato swells up incredibly fast, but the skin cannot stretch fast enough to accommodate the sudden pressure, so it literally bursts open. The secret to perfectly smooth, unblemished tomatoes is absolute consistency. Now that they are fruiting, you must maintain an even level of soil moisture. This is exactly why that thick layer of mulch we talked about earlier is so important. It acts as a buffer against those extreme wet and dry swings. By watering deeply and consistently on a schedule, rather than starving them and then drowning them, you ensure flawless fruits every single time. There is another terrifying issue that strikes right when you think everything is going perfectly. You go to admire a beautiful, heavy green tomato on the vine, but when you look at the bottom of the fruit, there is a disgusting, sunken, black, leathery patch. This is called blossom end rot, and it ruins countless harvests every year. The immediate reaction of most people is to panic and dump bags of calcium powder onto the soil, believing the dirt is depleted. But here is the secret truth. 99% of the time, there is plenty of calcium naturally present in your garden soil. The problem is that calcium is a very heavy, slow-moving nutrient, and the plant can only transport it up the stem through the flow of water. Think of calcium like heavy packages and water as the delivery truck. If the soil gets too dry, the delivery truck stops running. The leaves at the top of the plant will selfishly steal whatever little water is left, and the fruit at the bottom gets totally ignored. Without that constant delivery of calcium, the cells at the bottom of the tomato literally collapse and rot away. Once again, the cure for blossom end rot is not to run to the store and buy expensive chemical sprays. The cure is simply fixing your watering habits. Deep, consistent watering ensures the delivery trucks keep moving smoothly all season long, carrying that precious calcium exactly where it needs to go. Even with perfect soil and perfect watering, you will eventually have to deal with pests. A very common sight is waking up to find the tender new growth of your tomato vines completely covered in tiny, crawling green bugs called aphids. They suck the sap right out of the plant, causing the leaves to curl and wither. The instinct to grab a bottle of chemical pesticide is strong, but you must resist. When you spray broad-spectrum chemicals, you do kill the aphids, but you also kill the ladybugs, the hoverflies, and the parasitic wasps. You completely destroy the natural ecosystem. The problem is that aphids reproduce incredibly fast, much faster than their predators. So when the chemicals wear off, the aphids return by the thousands, and now there are zero good bugs left to stop them. Instead of nuclear warfare, use the lazy approach. Take your garden hose, attach a spray nozzle, and simply blast the aphids off the leaves with a strong jet of cold water. They have soft bodies and very weak legs. Once they are knocked into the mud, they usually cannot climb back up. Doing this every few days disrupts their life cycle without harming a single beneficial insect. By keeping the chemicals out of your garden, you allow nature's army of predators to move in and handle the heavy lifting of pest control for you. If aphids are annoying, the tomato hornworm is the stuff of actual nightmares. These are massive, thick, bright green caterpillars with a menacing-looking horn on their tail end. They are eating machines with incredible camouflage. A single hornworm can strip an entire tomato branch of its leaves overnight, leaving behind nothing but bare stems and little black droppings. Because they blend in perfectly with the green foliage, finding them during the day is incredibly difficult. You can stare right at them and not see them. But the smart gardener knows a brilliant, completely effortless trick to hunt them down. Hornworms actually glow fluorescent green under ultraviolet light. So, instead of squinting at your plants in the hot afternoon sun, wait until it is pitch black outside. Grab a cheap blacklight flashlight and walk down your garden rows. Under the UV light, the hornworms will light up like bright neon signs against the dark leaves. They are impossible to miss. You simply pluck them off by hand and toss them into a bucket of soapy water, or feed them to your chickens if you have them. This simple shift in tactics turns a frustrating, tedious daytime chore into a fun 5-minute evening activity that guarantees your tomato plants will not be devoured while you sleep. Despite our best efforts with spacing and pruning, fungal diseases like late blight can sometimes blow in on a summer storm. Blight is a fast-moving killer that presents as dark, water-soaked spots in the leaves that quickly turn brown and papery. If left unchecked, it can destroy a healthy plant in less than a week. The absolute key to managing fungal issues is understanding that you cannot cure a leaf once it is infected. You can only protect the healthy leaves that are left. This is where a sensible, organic approach using a copper-based fungicide spray becomes incredibly useful. But you have to use it correctly. Think of a copper spray like putting on an umbrella before you step out into the rain. It creates a hostile, microscopic barrier on the surface of the leaf that prevents fungal spores from taking root. If you wait until the entire plant is dying to start spraying, it is like opening your umbrella after you are already completely drenched. It will not do any good. If you live in a highly humid climate prone to disease, the smart move is to apply a light, preventative spray of organic copper early in the season, right after a heavy rain, focusing on the healthy foliage. Combine this protective shield with our earlier lazy methods of good airflow and removing bottom leaves, and your plants will be tough enough to survive almost anything. There is a very delicate balance to strike during the dog days of summer, when the sun is absolutely blazing. We talked earlier about removing lower leaves to prevent disease, and plucking suckers to direct energy. But some overzealous gardeners get pruning fever and start snipping off healthy green leaves all over the top of the plant, thinking they are helping the tomatoes get more sunlight. This is a disastrous mistake that leads to a condition called sun scald. Just like human skin, a bare green tomato fruit can get severe sunburn if it is suddenly exposed to hours of harsh, direct afternoon sunlight. The skin will turn white, blister, and eventually rot, completely ruining the fruit. Those big, healthy leaves at the top of the plant serve a vital purpose. They are not just solar panels for energy. They act as a natural protective umbrella, casting a gentle, dappled shade over the developing fruit below. The lazy gardener leaves the canopy alone. As long as the leaves are green and healthy, leave them on the plant to do their job. Let them protect the fruit from the baking sun. Your only job is to provide consistent water at the roots and enjoy the sight of those heavy green clusters safely maturing in the cool shade provided by their own leaves. Finally, we arrive at the harvest, and this is where I am going to ask you to break the oldest rule in the gardening book. We have all romanticized the idea of the perfectly vine-ripened tomato, leaving the fruit on the plant until it is completely, deeply red and soft. But leaving nearly ripe tomatoes out in the garden is incredibly risky. That is exactly when the squirrels, the birds, and the stink bugs decide to take a bite. It is also when a sudden rainstorm will cause them to split open. The ultimate lazy gardener's secret is to harvest at what is called the breaker stage. When a green tomato reaches its full size, it will begin to show a slight blush of pink or yellow on the bottom. The moment that color shift happens, the tomato has completely sealed itself off from the main plant. It is no longer taking in nutrients or sugars from the vine. It is fully self-sufficient. If you pick the tomato at this breaker stage and bring it inside to sit on your kitchen counter at room temperature, it will continue to ripen perfectly. It will turn just as red and taste exactly as sweet and complex as a tomato left on the vine, but you have completely removed the risk of bugs eating it or the skin splitting. You get a perfect, pristine harvest every single time, outsmarting nature at the very last second. And there you have it, the complete blueprint for lazy, incredibly productive tomato gardening. We have completely flipped the script on traditional methods. By trench planting deep into the earth, we built drought-resistant roots that save us hours of watering. By utilizing the Florida weave, we created an impenetrable fortress against the wind in a fraction of the time it takes to build individual cages. We learned how to feed the soil microbes instead of constantly mixing chemical fertilizers, and we uncovered the shocking truth about harvesting at the breaker stage to steal our perfect tomatoes away from the squirrels and the rainstorms. All of these techniques prove one beautiful point. Working smarter, not harder, is the true secret to a thriving vegetable garden. By setting up these natural systems early in the season, you stop fighting against nature and start letting it do the heavy lifting for you. You get to spend your summer evenings actually enjoying the fruits of your labor, rather than sweating over weeds and wilted leaves. Thank you so much for watching and learning with me today. If this video changed the way you think about growing tomatoes, please hit that subscribe button and give the video a like so it can reach more frustrated gardeners. Now, I want to hear from you down in the comments. What is the absolute biggest mistake you have ever made in your tomato garden, and which of these lazy methods are you going to try this year?